Every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, the small bell above the door of an old watch shop rang through the quiet streets of Maple Hollow. For more than 40 years, the same elderly man unlocked the faded wooden door, swept the front step, and carefully wound the large grandfather clock standing in the corner of his shop. His name was Samuel Carter. At 82 years old, his hands trembled slightly, but they were still steady enough to repair the finest watches anyone could bring him. People often wondered why he never retired. His shop earned very little money. Most days, only one or two customers stopped by. Some came only to chat. Others believed Samuel simply had nowhere else to go. But they were all wrong. Hidden inside an old oak cabinet at the back of the shop was a small velvet box. Samuel opened it every evening before closing. Inside rested a silver pocket watch with a cracked crystal and an unusual engraving. "To my sons, stay together, no matter what." For 42 years, Samuel had guarded that watch. It was not his. It belonged to someone who had disappeared on a stormy autumn night in 1984. Everyone else had forgotten that tragedy. Samuel never had. As thunder rolled across the sky outside, he gently closed the box and whispered the same words he had spoken every night for decades. "I promised I would return you to your family, and I never break a promise." At that exact moment, the little bell above the shop door rang. A young woman stepped inside, holding the very same pocket watch. Samuel Carter had lived in Maple Hollow for nearly 60 years, yet many people knew almost nothing about him. Every morning, he opened his little watch shop before the sun fully rose. He polished the glass display case, dusted the shelves, and listened to the gentle ticking of hundreds of clocks. To Samuel, those sounds were comforting. They reminded him that no matter how difficult life became, time always moved forward. His customers were mostly older people. Some came to have a favorite watch repaired. Others simply wanted someone to talk to. Samuel always welcomed them with a warm smile and a fresh cup of tea. Children passing the shop often waved through the window. Samuel would smile back and sometimes hand them a small wooden toy he had carved during quiet afternoons. The children called him Grandpa Sam, even though he had no grandchildren of his own. Years earlier, Samuel had been engaged to marry the love of his life, Eleanor. They dreamed of raising a family together, but fate had other plans. Eleanor became seriously ill and passed away before they could be married. After losing her, Samuel poured all of his heart into repairing watches. Every tiny gear and delicate spring gave him a reason to keep going. Fixing broken timepieces helped him cope with a heart that never fully healed. Although his life seemed peaceful, there was one habit that puzzled everyone. Every evening, just before closing the shop, Samuel would lock the front door, walk to the old oak cabinet in the back room, and carefully remove a worn velvet box. Inside lay a silver pocket watch with cracked glass. He never repaired it. He never sold it. He simply stared at it for a few quiet moments, gently running his fingers over the engraved words, "To my sons, stay together no matter what." Then he would place it back inside the box and whisper, "I'm still looking." No one knew who he was searching for. No one knew why that broken watch meant more to him than anything else in the shop. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the windows. Samuel glanced toward the front door, unaware that before the day was over, a stranger would walk into his shop and change the course of his life forever. The bell above the shop door gave a soft, familiar ring as the young woman stepped inside. She looked to be in her late 20s, wearing a rain-soaked coat and carrying a small leather handbag. Tiny drops of water fell onto the wooden floor as she paused, looking around at the hundreds of clocks ticking in perfect harmony. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Samuel smiled politely. "Good afternoon," he said gently. "How can I help you today?" The young woman returned the smile, though her eyes carried a hint of sadness. "My name is Emily Harper," she replied. "I'm hoping you can repair something that belonged to my grandfather." She carefully reached into her handbag and placed a worn silver pocket watch on the counter. The instant Samuel saw it, his heart skipped a beat. It looked almost identical to the one hidden inside his velvet box. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The silver had aged in exactly the same way. The delicate pattern around the edges matched perfectly. Even the small scratch near the winding crown was in the same place. Slowly, Samuel turned the watch over. His breathing stopped. Engraved on the back were the same words he had read every evening for more than 40 years. To my sons, stay together no matter what. For a long moment, the shop was silent except for the steady ticking of the clocks. Emily noticed the change in his expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. Samuel looked into her eyes. "Where did you get this watch?" Emily hesitated. "My grandfather gave it to me just before he passed away last month," she said. "He told me that if I ever wanted to learn the truth about our family, I should bring it to a watchmaker named Samuel Carter." Samuel felt the room begin to spin. He had never met Emily before. He had never heard her grandfather's name, yet somehow, her grandfather had known exactly where to find him. Samuel slowly walked to the old oak cabinet at the back of the shop. With shaking hands, he unlocked it and lifted out the velvet box he had guarded for 42 years. He returned to the counter and gently opened it. Emily gasped. Inside lay another silver pocket watch. Side by side, the two watches looked almost identical, like twins separated by time. Samuel whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "I've been waiting 42 years for someone to walk through that door." Outside, the rain grew heavier. Neither of them realized that the two watches were only the beginning of a mystery that would uncover a forgotten tragedy, a broken family, and a promise that had survived the passage of time itself. For several long moments, neither Samuel nor Emily spoke. The two silver pocket watches rested side by side on the wooden counter beneath the warm glow of an old desk lamp. They were almost identical, the same delicate engraving, the same polished silver case. Even the tiny initials inside each cover had been carved by the same craftsman decades earlier. Samuel adjusted his glasses and carefully opened both watches. Inside the first was the letter A. Inside the second was the letter B. Emily leaned closer. "What do those letters mean?" she whispered. Samuel took a slow breath. They belonged to two brothers. He gently closed the watches and looked toward the rain falling outside. "I was only 40 years old when they first came into this shop. It was the autumn of 1984. Two young brothers walked through that very door with their father. The older boy was quiet and thoughtful. The younger one smiled at everyone he met." Samuel paused as though he could still see them standing there. Their father had ordered these watches from a master watchmaker in Switzerland. They weren't expensive because of the silver. They were priceless because of what they represented. Emily listened without moving. The father wanted each son to carry one watch for the rest of his life. Inside each case, he had a single letter engraved, one watch for the eldest son, one for the youngest. Samuel pointed to the inscription on the back, "To my sons, stay together no matter what." Those weren't just words, they were a promise. Emily looked down at the watch her grandfather had left behind. "My grandfather never told me any of this." Samuel nodded sadly. "Many people spend their lives protecting painful memories. Sometimes silence feels easier than telling the truth." He slowly opened an old ledger that had remained untouched for decades. Between its yellowed pages rested a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local train derailment leaves several missing." Samuel carefully slid the clipping across the counter. The brothers and their father boarded that train only 3 days after collecting these watches. Emily's eyes widened as she read the article. The accident happened during a violent storm. Rescue workers searched for days, but not everyone was found. Some were declared dead, others simply disappeared. She looked back at Samuel. "And my grandfather." Samuel lowered his eyes. Was one of the missing? A heavy silence filled the shop. Then Samuel reached beneath the counter and removed a small iron key tied with an old leather cord. "I've kept something locked away for 42 years, he said quietly. "I always believed the right person would come for it." Emily stared at the key, unaware that what it opened would reveal a secret hidden since the night of the disaster. A secret capable of changing everything she believed about her family, A pocket watch to someone who truly understands them is not so different from a diary. Old watchmakers know that a watch absorbs the habits of its owner, the way it's wound, the temperature it's kept at, the small dents and scratches life leaves behind. And sometimes, if you are patient and skilled enough, a watch can tell you where it has been. Elias disassembled the watch piece by piece, laying each tiny gear and spring onto a velvet cloth in the exact order of a ritual he'd performed 10,000 times before. Inside the case, wedged beneath the movement where it had been hidden for 4 decades, he found something the family had never noticed: a tightly folded scrap of paper, brittle and yellowed, tucked into a compartment so small only someone who had built a working replica of the town clock, someone who understood machinery the way Elias did, would ever think to look there. He unfolded it with tweezers, breath held. It was a letter, unsent. Written in a hand Elias recognized instantly from decades of documents in his corkboard archive, Thomas Whitfield's. The letter, dated October 15, 1986, the very morning after Clara vanished, read like a confession never delivered. Thomas wrote that he had loved Clara secretly for years, just as Elias had. He wrote that on the night of October 14th, desperate and heartbroken over her engagement to Robert Callahan, he had climbed the town hall clock tower, using the key he had access to as a clerk, intending only to sit alone with his grief among the gears, a place he'd always found strange comfort in. But while he was up there, he witnessed something. He saw Clara, not taken, not harmed, walking alone across the frost-covered field behind her house, carrying a small case, moving with purpose, not panic. He saw her meet someone at the edge of the woods, a carriage. She got in willingly. And as she left, Thomas, in his grief and confusion, not understanding what he was witnessing, had accidentally struck the tower's manual chime lever while stumbling backward in shock, causing the bell's mechanism to strike one extra time. Clara Bennett had not been kidnapped. She had run away. The letter explained that Thomas recognized the carriage. It belonged to a family from the next county, the Hargroves, with whom Clara's family had a bitter, decades-old feud over land inheritance. Clara, it turned out, had fallen in love with the Hargrove family's youngest son, Edward, a romance forbidden by both families. Terrified of the consequences and unwilling to marry Robert Callahan, a match arranged more for business convenience than affection, Clara had planned her disappearance for months, waiting only for the right night. Thomas never told anyone what he saw. He was consumed by guilt, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he had loved Clara too, and seeing her leave with someone else on a night that would soon be treated as a tragedy broke something in him he could never repair. He left Ashbrook Hollow not out of suspicion of wrongdoing, but out of unbearable heartbreak, carrying his secret in silence for the rest of his life, sealed inside a watch he never had the courage to give away. Elias sat in his workshop for a long time after reading the letter, the gears of the disassembled watch scattered before him like the pieces of a puzzle finally complete. He was not angry. He felt instead an overwhelming aching relief, the specific relief that comes only after decades of not knowing. Clara had not been hurt. She had not been taken. She had chosen her own life, on her own terms, on a cold October night 40 years ago, and in her escape she had accidentally left behind a mystery that would occupy an entire town's imagination and one lonely watchmaker's entire life. With Dana Whitfield's blessing, Elias spent the following weeks doing something he had never allowed himself to do before, following the mystery all the way to its true end, rather than simply circling it forever. Public records, patient letters, and a retired historian in the neighboring county eventually led him to a small coastal town 300 miles away. There, under the name Clara Hargrove, a 90-year-old woman had lived a long, quiet life with her husband Edward until his passing a decade earlier. She had raised 4 children. She had run a small bookshop. She had, by every account, been happy. Elias wrote her a letter, the first he had ever written to her, 40 years too late, and yet somehow exactly on time. He did not accuse her of anything. He simply told her that her disappearance had never stopped mattering to the town she left behind, that a young apprentice clockmaker had spent his whole life quietly making sure the world remembered to ask what really happened to her, and that he was glad, truly glad, to finally know she had lived. Clara wrote back 3 weeks later. Her handwriting was shaky but warm. She thanked him. She said she had thought of Ashbrook Hollow every October 14th for 40 years, wondering if anyone ever worried or if the town had simply forgotten her. She asked him to tell her family gently that she was sorry for the pain her silence had caused, but not sorry for the life she had chosen. Elias never turned the story into gossip. He shared what needed to be shared, quietly, gently, with Clara's surviving family, and eventually with the town historian for the record. The story ran once in the local paper, respectfully, without spectacle. 40-year mystery of Clara Bennett. Finally solved. Beloved local watchmaker credited with discovery. People in town, of course, wanted to make Elias a hero. They wanted interviews, a plaque, maybe even a small parade. Elias politely declined all of it. He reopened his shop the very next Monday, same hours as always, same crooked sign above the door. But something in him had changed. The corkboard in the hidden back room came down at last. 62 notebooks were placed carefully into a single box and given to the town archive, in case anyone ever wants to understand how patience solves what urgency cannot, as he wrote in a short note tucked on top. And on the following October 14th, the 41st anniversary of that strange 13-chime night, the town hall bell rang exactly 12 times at midnight, just as it always should. Elias stood alone on the lane outside his shop, listening to each toll, finally at peace with a story that had shaped the entire quiet architecture of his life. He was 81 years old. He had never married. He had spent 40 years solving a mystery, not for fame, not for reward, but simply because he could not bear to let a piece of unexplained time go on ticking, unresolved, forever. And in the end, that was exactly the kind of man Elias Voss had always been. Not a detective, not a hero, just an old watchmaker who understood, better than almost anyone alive, that every mechanism, no matter how mysterious, eventually reveals its truth to someone patient enough to listen.